Hi, my name's Eric Anzalone, and welcome to Tech Talk. Today, we're going to be discussing those buzzwords I'm sure you've been hearing about: cybersecurity, malware, ransomware, hackers, bad actors. It's in the headlines, people, right? You have the Colonial Pipeline, you have solar winds, you have JBS meat processing, you got Microsoft Exchange servers, you even got the NBA, the Houston Rockets. They were hacked, right? And these are just headlines that you might recognize. If you did a Google search and you just search ransomware attack or cyber attack, you're going to get a long list of names and companies you've probably never heard of, like a pizza place or a furniture company. I mean, this is affecting everyone these days, and it's a big, serious concern. And it's complex, right? But you know what? Complex is not exactly equal to complicated. It's not the same thing. So says the mission statement of Complex Cybersecurity Solutions, the company that my first guest, my buddy Brian Friedman, works for. Brian is a CISSP, a Certified Information Systems Security Specialist, and he's got a there you go. And you got a master's degree in cybersecurity. I think this guy knows what he's talking about. So welcome, Brian. Tell us a little bit about yourself that I haven't already told the kids playing along at home.
No, that was a great intro, Eric. Been around the block for working in security for almost a decade now, all across both federal, commercial, represent both small people and large enterprises. So really kind of happy to have this discussion today.
Let's go to the headlines now. Some of you may know this, others may not. On May 12th, 2021, there was an executive order from the White House on improving the nation's cybersecurity. And I quote, "It is the policy of my administration that the prevention, detection, assessment, and remediation of cyber incidents is a top priority and essential to national and economic security. The federal government must lead by example." And further down in section 3, it says the federal government must adopt security best practices, advancing toward zero trust architecture. And within 60 days of the date of this order, a plan is to be developed to implement zero trust architecture. Well, that date has passed. So we're hoping Joe and the team there follow through with that mandate. So let's start with that. Zero trust architecture, Brian. Can you explain in a little more detail what that is and why the security model is important to businesses?
So zero trust is a term that's really been thrown around a lot in security circles. The whole premise of it is really don't trust anything and validate continuously every single aspect of what's happening in your organization. I think the easiest way to distill down a zero trust model is to treat everything as an exchange, a transaction, so to speak. You log into a computer, your laptop or desktop, you provide a username and password. You need to validate that that password is correct, or the user is coming from a legitimate place, or Eric is actually in New Jersey versus logging in from China somewhere. These are all things that you want to check as part of a zero trust model. This even goes further into things like Eric wants to access a file, right? Or you can pivot this to Wile E. Coyote downloads a PDF. He wants to open it within his organization. Acme Corp is a little bit unsure if Wile E. Coyote should even open up that PDF because they don't know what could be embedded in that. So they want to scan and check it before it. So this is where an AV vendor would become into a great play. So there's a lot of components to zero trust, but the core of it distills down to always check and verify where something's coming from before you execute on it.
So basically, trust no one.
Trust no one, right?
Right. Like you said, and these are topical attacks. Obviously, they're in the headlines. They're not all large corporations. Why would a hacker go after a small to medium-sized business and not just go for the big bank?
I think when you look, and there's been some studies on this around who gets affected by ransomware or these attacks, it really is non-discriminatory. Everyone across verticals of industry types, from transportation to healthcare to service work. I think even your freight line moving companies, like Old Dominion or um, Mayflower, things like that, are all targets for these things. If a company has revenue, they can pay a ransom, and that's really ultimately what the goal of these organizations is to really make money.
You're the specialist at this. I've always wondered, does paying the ransom make sense? Because once that's happened, isn't that information out there on the dark web and being sold, and they're just going to keep coming back for more?
Well, no, right? These organizations have to have a form of legitimacy in order to receive continuous money, right? People have to know if I give them money, I'll get keys to unlock my data. So they need to almost kind of respect that transaction. Most recently, John Oliver actually did a great piece on ransomware and how it's been totally commoditized, from where people can sign up in these forums and buy with Bitcoin or Ethereum, access to these networks to actually execute attacks. So with a couple of clicks and no keystrokes, you too can become a hacker as well and start extorting organizations. And these organizations are selling access to other companies, to other people, to further extort and further make money. It's a huge enterprise that's out there across, probably 10 major attacker groups out there in the world that, we're working as a company, QOMPLX, to monitor very, very closely for what they're doing.
So here we are. This is the situation. Now, what can business owners and business leaders do?
Well, there's a lot people can do, and it's often very, very complicated. From the key tenets, of course, right? Focusing on what you can do with what you have. Right? Look at your resourcing. The second part, I always really stress, is to lean on local and regional security partners and vendors you have in your area. These are local experts who understand and can really help bring a wealth of expertise, particularly when you're looking at medium and small businesses. I don't expect them to have a big bench or wealth of security staff, as part of their team, right? Those are expensive resources. They're very transient in nature, and it's costly to maintain a program. So you want to be able to work with someone like an MSSP provider, or a local regional partner who can help bring you, what is best in breed today. Technology vendors come and go. What can they recommend? How can they help me? Is there pro services they can recommend or do themselves? And really kind of put myself into a good security posture. The second thing I always recommend is really continuously test yourself, whether that is annual or quarterly pen testing or external scanning services. Those are also very important to make sure that you're monitoring and reflecting on, am I doing a good job, right? The same way that you would reflect on yourself as, a person in sports, right? Did I run a good race? Did I jump really far? Did I dive really good? Did I throw the ball really fast, right? We want to reflect and review and check the footage, right? Almost, right? See if my company's doing the right things. And that not just includes technology, but also policy, procedures, documentation. Do we have an appropriate method for unlocking people's accounts? What's the process that we have for issuing laptops to new employees so someone's not coming in and pretending they're a new employee? If I impersonate a manager and say, give hacker one a laptop, he's a new employee, you essentially gave him keys into your enterprise and you unknowingly did that, right? So there's a lot of things organizations can do, but partnering with local service providers and MSPs, security vendors, helps a ton.
Yeah, I was just going to say, a lot of things you just mentioned are things that we do at PulseOne.
Right, and PulseOne's a great example of a partner to use.
Right. So yeah, we do pen testing. We're monitoring and doing patching, and we always got eyes. We have a SOC, Security Operations Center, a NOC, Network Operations Center. So we do have eyes on it, but it's also good, especially with security, to partner with companies like QOMPLX, right? To take it to that next level, right? So you're getting your how to put it in an analogy. So you got your doors are locked, but then you also have a security system as well. So you got your managed service provider that's holding down the fort, locking the doors, and then you got that added security company as well.
There's a great book out there called The Trusted Advisor, where the role of regional partners, MSSPs, PulseOne with their customer base, they really serve as trusted advisors to their customers, and customers will reach out, say who's a good security provider for this type of control, right? Between AV or EDR or infrastructure and critical control security, where QOMPLX plays. You're able to evaluate and vet who you think is best and who you bring to the table, which is powerful to relationship, but also keeps vendors honest.
Okay, so let's go back to Wile E. Coyote. And
I love Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah, me too. Poor Wile E. How does Wile E get caught? How do they find him and get into the Acme company? How does a bad actor do that?
So if I want to exploit Acme Corp, for example, and I want to do it through Wile E, right? Is that kind of how we want to phrase this?
Yeah.
A million different ways, right? Wile E's a frequent buyer of Acme products. He's probably spent, I don't know, close to probably 2 million in products there between the dynamite and the animals, and God knows how much they've cost Acme Corp in shipping costs, given the weight of these animals I've seen and the injuries they've caused. Wile E probably is the preferred program with these guys. You hack Wile E's accounts that probably belong to the system, right? Wile E probably has, a frequent buyer card. Every 10th animal is free, but you want to make sure that you're evaluating these applications that you're building internally so that they can be properly segmented and not spread. If a compromise were to happen on your loyalty program and it's not properly segmented from the rest of your enterprise organization, an attacker could pivot from a loyalty program into a core database, into your entire infrastructure from there. So in cases like that, it's very good to have technology reviews, application software testing, secure code development, having a good secure development life cycle are all good things to recommend from a practitioner perspective to employ.
Right, because I think the big picture is, you hear SolarWinds, you hear Colonial Pipeline, everyone's thinking, oh, this company got hacked. The employees get caught, which not inadvertently give the keys to the company.
Yeah, that's right on.
Right, like through phishing emails or spear phishing, right?
No, that's absolutely right. Phishing is probably the leading vector that attackers will take to gain access into a company. People, company or attacker groups. I mean, sure, they will target big names. So think the Sony, the Marriott, the Sherwood, the Maersk breaches. They're targeting the organization as a whole and going in that way. But more often than not, it's easier to go after a person who belongs to that organization. This is that wide net that we talk about, right? Whether I can impersonate an email or claim to be inside a company, gain access to a laptop. From there, I've bypassed, common things you would see like MFA or two-factor, a CAC card, an RSA token. But once I'm on a laptop, I'm using identities and pivoting in, right? So now I'm escalating from not only a person, Brian Friedman at, acmecorp.com. I'm now going up to, secure data, secret sauce, what's the magical recipe, customer records. And then you just have to think about what would you actually pay for? What would be the impact to your organization if you had to announce a breach, right? Or think about PCI breach costs to you, right? For not securing PCI data around credit card or consumer information, loss of your customers, or even lost in brand trust is hugely impactful to certain organizations, depending on what they're servicing, what their role is. What we're really looking at is what people call a defense in depth approach to security. What I think has kind of happened over the years, probably maybe the last 10 years, probably 7 years, is a lot of weight has been pushed on perimeter, being I want to prevent something from getting in my organization at all. So I want to buy or I want to invest in VPNs or firewalls, AV, in order to prevent malware from being installed on laptops, or EDRs to find what could have been installed there, right? More telemetry, more data. The problem with those is that it doesn't help once something actually gets in. If we look into testimonies from leading EDR providers and their CISOs and CEOs and leaders, you can see that even these guys are still assuming breach. If you Google, pick your EDR vendor of choice and the word bypass, you'll find scripts and guides, tutorials on how to bypass very, very name brand things, right? Your Big Red, McAfee, your Symantec, your, CrowdStrikes, all the big guys, and they certainly work in to shore these things up. But the truth of the matter is, there's always somebody who's trying to get you at the end of the day. Where Complex pivots differently is that we want to focus on really what I call kind of the bookends of the security stack. The first is I want to be able to reduce your risk, reduce the available attack surface that can be exploited. And this is done via external exposure assessments, saying, what do you present to the internet as an organization, and how can I improve the overall posture of what it is to lessen the chances of you being ransomware, right? So someone impersonating your domains from a phishing or a spear phishing attack, like you said, or what ports or protocols you've exposed, so I can shore those up and make sure they're being implemented in a secure manner. Right? These are all things you can work with a local provider like a PulseOne to help do if you don't have network or administrative expertise on staff to kind of do those types of things. Now, your firewall, your VPN, your EDR, your AV, those are all great technologies. And I would never tell anybody in the world, if you have Complex, you never need another firewall again, because that's hubris. Right? That's silly. But what we do know is that those technologies can fail, right? But then we also do know, and this is proven time and time again via studies by some really top-end firms like your Coyote and things like that, that there's a commonality in malware, being that once they come in, they are grabbing creds, they're moving laterally, and they're escalating as quick as they can to own a DC and pop the whole organization, right? There was a breach, or not a breach, there was a leak, probably I think about a week and a half ago from Conti. And Conti, if you're not aware, is a very, very large malware authoring group who's out there to just make as much money as possible. I think they made over a couple million in 8 months just peddling malware. But they had a disgruntled employee who leaked their manuals and what their playbooks were. And their legit playbook was get in, ransomware, spear phishing, malvertising, those common attack vectors we just talked about. Get creds wherever you can find them, then attack the DC, move laterally. And what we as Complex do are here to shore up the DC security. We're here to evaluate every transaction it has from a zero trust perspective, both good authentication, so whether I log in with my own good credentials, and making sure someone's not impersonating Brian or Wile E Coyote into Acme Corp's domains. We do the same thing for domain controllers behaving in the network, and we're also extending that capability, which is really new to the overall cybersecurity space, into third-party service providers. So think if your organization uses Amazon, right? If someone were to compromise your domain and then pivot into your Amazon assets, where you might have web applications or storefronts or customer data or secret sauce to whatever products you might be manufacturing, if that's your space, medical records, think about it. There's a lot that can be going on there. If that's exploited, then now that becomes mine, and then the casualty to your organization becomes exponentially worse, and we want to protect that. So this is where Complex comes in to help out organizations, and we would do this, hand in hand with local teams, and then also the people at customer sites.
And your friendly neighborhood MSP.
That's what I said, local teams. So
I know. All right, Brian. Well, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you joining me today and getting a little clarity on all this complex and complicated cyber security craziness. Thanks, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Always great talking to you.